A little while back, I made a short about buying this filing cabinet and how I needed it because a dresser I was refinishing I may not be able to sell. Well, I decided to keep that dresser to use for myself because my current dresser, the drawers are starting to fall apart and I'm just ready for something new. But to replace my dresser, I'm going to have to get rid of the whole matching set in my bedroom and get another dresser for my husband. So I was given this dresser and now I want to see if I can make it match the dresser I decided to keep. I'm Sarah. I've been flipping furniture and have redone a few rooms in my house, but I have so many projects I want to learn how to do. I'm usually figuring things out as I go and learn from a lot of mistakes, but I'm so excited to see all these ideas I have come to life and to get to share them with you. So, welcome to my channel. Let's quickly look over some of the flaws and scratches on this dresser before we dive into making it match the other dresser I already have. There's a significant scratch on the top that I'll have to pay attention to when sanding to make sure I get that out. This side scuff thing, I'm gonna have to make sure that I either sand it smooth or patch it some way so that it's not showing under the paint. And then this curvies are gonna need to cut off because somebody already cut the front curvies off, and you can tell it's cut off because you can see on the sides where it was cut. Also, this will determine how I refinish it, but this corner has broken off of one of the drawer fronts, so I don't have the skills to replace this to make it look like wood, so the drawer fronts will have to be painted. This is kind of telling me this by looking this piece over. This drawer has this oil spot that I will treat, and we'll see how well we can get that gone. Then just looking the rest of things over, hardware is going to have to be changed. This mold is going to have to be dealt with. I usually use vinegar and sunshine. I'm going to try this time with some simple green and see how that gets it cleaned up. This drawer glide is broken, and on the bottom of the drawer, it's missing half of it, which is funny. My husband's current bottom drawer is also missing the drawer glide, but I'm not replacing that one. That goo is going to need to be gone, and I'll have to pay attention to these scratches when scuff sanding and getting ready to paint. So after looking it over, I also saw these splotches, which I'll have to make sure I clean it up really good so it doesn't come through the paint, and the backside also has mold. Yay! So sunbathing it is for this piece to start working on cleaning it out, airing it out, drying it out, and getting the mold gone. So I always clean my pieces with Simple Green. It's a nice degreaser to get gunk and junk off and just make sure that really gooey spots I really work hard at, like that extra gooey spot, which was probably tape, I was able to get off with just using the Simple Green and that plastic scraper to get the goo gone. Now with the back of it, I don't know why in hindsight I did this, but I used Simple Green on the mold and I did not use vinegar, which I don't think was the best choice, but it sat in the sun. So once everything was cleaned up, it was time to get the hardware off. With everything cleaned up, I did find a drawer that needed glued back together, and I just used a small amount of glue in every little nook and glue it and clamp it back down. So then everything sat in the sun some more. I do not like mold. I want it gone. I'm assessing at this point if I need to put any reinforcement in the front because whoever cut off the curves cut off a lot of wood and it was part of the support. I decided I don't have a nail gun and I think it'll be fine without it. You can see here, I'm only cutting off the tips. I am not cutting off a large chunk of wood. The support is still there, just cutting the curves off. I think this piece will be fine, but I'm just pointing that out in case you try to do something like this on your piece. I recommend don't cut too much. Then I cleaned up the mold on the bottom that I found, and then the feet were already cut, but I just needed to clean them up so that they didn't look so rough cut and a little more smooth. So once those were good and clean, I need to move this piece to get ready for sanding. And if you ever wonder how I do this by myself, it's really clunky and awkward, but I get it. On the bottom where somebody else already cut, a gash was kind of taken out of the front and I needed to fill that in. And I want to sand this to stain. So I'm using a wood filler that is supposedly stainable. All the areas that I am painting, I am scuff sanding with 220 grit sandpaper. That was enough to roughen up the finish, to get it ready to prime before painting. I did the same on the front. I want everything that I'm painting for the paint to adhere really well. I am not using furniture paint, so I am prepping the surfaces very intentionally. And then every drawer front, I am scuff sanding so that the paint will stick very nicely. There are portions I want to sand down to the raw wood and stain because I need this to match the other dresser that has the raw wood look. So with the top, I am trying to sand it down to stain because it looks like it's going to be fantastic wood. However, with the 120 grit sandpaper I started with, it did not knock stuff down very fast, so I went down to 100, and it was taking forever. So I got out my scraper to see if that would move anything, and no, I think my blade's dull. Anyway, it did nothing, so I went back to sanding, and it took forever. So anytime I look at a piece and think about I need to sand it, I'm like, oh my goodness. So here's me just being bored and trying to sand this thing, which that process doesn't work. You really have to stick in a small area and go very slowly, like you see right here. But I'm not going to bore you with this. Let's fast forward. I got this done. It was fine. We're moving on. So here we are, we have it sanded down, and now I just need to incrementally sand the whole top nicely, moving to a higher grit and dusting in between. So I got the whole thing sanded at 100 grit. Now I'm going in at 120. I will sand the whole thing off, dust it. Oh, here we are. Just move quickly because nobody wants to be bored with this. Dust it off. Then I will go back in with 180 grit, and the reason you're moving up slowly is because any swirl marks that probably came when you use that really thick grit sandpaper, you need to slowly work your way up to get them out. If you just jump to 220, it's not going to work. You have to go slowly, and I've actually never tried it. It's just from what I've learned from watching other people. They say you have to incrementally go. Maybe someday I'll try it just to see. But anyway, I worked my way up to 220 grit sandpaper. I stopped there. You don't want to go any smoother when staining, and bam, we're done. Not really though, because now I need to hand sand lots of areas. You see, I got the feet all sanded off, but all these little intricate stuff that I want to stain, it all needs sanded in the same order. So we'll skip all that. Just know I did it. Now let's work on the drawer fronts, which, surprise, is actually just more hand sanding. But I'm going to paint this, so I'm only scuff sanding. I'm not sanding down to bare wood, so it's going to go a lot faster. The bare wood areas, I'm hand sanding in those increments. So now I'm at the 180, and then I'll move up to the 220, and we'll get it good. Now on the flat edges, I did choose to use this block to help me keep the square edges when sanding so I wouldn't accidentally round them while hand sanding. So it's a lot of sanding. It's not that many areas and still a lot of sanding. So I like to use mineral spirits before staining to make sure any oils or gunk are cleaned up off of my pieces. I like to wipe the whole piece with mineral spirits, and then I just let it air dry, and it takes as long as it takes. While I have the mineral spirits out, I'm putting it on that oil stain in the one drawer to see if this will also help remove that. We'll see. I have other things to try. For fixing the corner of this drawer, I have these staples that I'm nailing in to just create a support so that I can put Bondo in and fill this in. I need to make sure that they are lower than the line of the drawer top. And I'm clamping on these wood pieces to create a base and marking where the corner needs to go out to for when I do Bondo. However, I realized I needed to put painter's tape underneath that, so I took that off and had to redo it, and I didn't film it. But I'm filling all of the drawer pull holes with Bondo because I'm going to buy new drawer pulls, and then I'm coming back with the tape underneath because that is needed so that the Bondo does not stick to my support wood pieces, and I'm just kind of putting a glob of Bondo on here and gonna let that sit for a little bit. I filled in some other holes, and then I came back and touched it up and tried to press it into where I thought it kind of needed to be. And then while it was still a little damp but mostly set, I came in with this little scalpel knife set that I have and carefully cut off some of the extra, not all of it. I will come in and sand once it's dry, all of the extra. I did whittle a little bit from the top off with the same scalpel knife just to help cut down how much time I would need in sanding and to see if I could do it and shape it up just a little bit more. With the mineral spirits dry now, I'm ready to do a pre-stain on the top, and I've started doing this because I had some woods not stain in a nice, even, smooth way, and I've been using this, which maybe has or has not helped, but any of the raw wood, I put the pre-stain on, let it sit for about 10 minutes, and then wiped off any excess. Now we're ready to stain, and I'm using Early American by Midwax. This is not my favorite Early American. I do like the tinted one with Varathane, but I already have this, and I'm trying to put a nice even coat over everything, and look how nice it looks. Like, it went on so nice, but as it dried, and I wiped off a little bit of the excess after it sat for about 15 minutes, it got splotchy, guys. I was so disappointed, and my dad likes to do woodworking, and he said he sometimes has a hard time with refinished products. Just, it doesn't always stain nice because some of the old stain is probably left in there. So it's just kind of a game you play when refinishing stuff. I've decided it may or may not turn out amazing, and sometimes it does, and sometimes it's splotchy, but it still looks great. Then I have to come in and sand down all that Bondo that I filled the holes with. I came in with a larger grit sandpaper to knock off the big chunks, and then came back in with, I believe, 180 grit to sand it a little smooth and get it flush with all of the holes. And some of the pieces after sanding, you could see these little pinholes of spaces that did not fill. And I checked for that because sometimes Bondo has air bubbles and that needs filled. So I had to hand stand to finish sanding that corner and get it nice and shaped to look like wood. And then that too had some bubbles. So I filled those bubbles in with a little bit of wood filler along with the other spots. So while that all dried, here you can see the top. It's splotchy. It did not look like that when I put the pre-stain on. It was not splotchy. So that was disappointing. Maybe I could have not stained it and just done raw wood. That might have worked, but again, I am trying to make this dresser match a previous dresser I already did, and that's the same stain color. So here we are. I moved everything inside to paint as the weather was changing and it was supposed to start raining. We had about a month of no rain, which was so nice. I could work on stuff outside. It would dry fast. It was wonderful. Once I got all the raw wood stained, I am taping that part off so that I can paint. I don't want to get paint on the raw wood, obviously, but I decided to stain first because I figured it's a small area. If I stained it and then taped it, and then I could pull the tape off while the last coat of paint at least was wet, then I should have a nice crisp line, and that would be easier than trying to paint and then stain and tape the painted area. I'm concerned that the painted area would come off with the painter's tape, so I figured stain wouldn't come off with the painter's tape, so I will tape the stained area and not tape the painted area, if that makes sense. So I chose to stain first, just ultimately. That was just my why. So I'm priming everything so that I can get good adherence with my paint. Again, the paint is not a nice quality furniture paint or bougie paint like Fusion Mineral Paint. It's just your run-of-the-mill Valspar paint. So I'm making sure, this is a Zinsser Benz primer, so it's a pretty good primer. It should hold really well. These spots that I'm spraying shellac on, I'm doing this because of the color difference. I want the paint to go on even and not have those spots bleed through. I probably should have done that first before priming, but sometimes you can prime and then figure out, oh, I need to shellac over this so that there's no bleed through, and you can do that and the shellac dries in like 10 minutes. So it's not going to set you back too bad. It's no big deal. You can do it in that order. If you know it's going to bleed through, you can obviously spray shellac before you put a primer on. I'm using the roller as much as possible because it gives a nice clean finish. In the past, I've opted to use a paintbrush more than a roller because I feel like it wastes less paint. But at this point, I just want a nice smooth finish, so I'm using a roller. I was at Walmart, and I had already ordered hardware online. That was like $50, but I saw this for $11, and I was like, maybe I can make it work. So I brought it home because you can always return stuff at Walmart. And this is the hardware I ordered online. It's not a perfect match for color, but it's not bad. But I was trying to decide if I could save $30, $29 and use this hardware. This is the piece I'm trying to match it to. And I decided I didn't like it. It wasn't worth it. I don't like the handles. They're nice handles, but not for these pieces. So I decided to return those to Walmart and go with the pieces that I bought on Amazon. I think they'll match better and be a better fit. After the paint dried, I did come in, like I mentioned before, and just make sure there's no bugs or dust or anything stuck to the paint before I come in and give the final coat. I did only do 2 coats. Sometimes you might think you need 3. It depends. Doing a coat of primer helps cut down on needing a 3rd coat of paint. So that's another reason why I like to prime. Isn't this satisfying to pull this off and see the beautiful crisp line? It worked on this side, but the other side was not so crisp, and I had to come back with that little scalpel knife and carefully pick off the paint as best I could. Now, the stained areas needs 3, probably 4 coats of this poly top coat, especially on the top, because I want it to have a nice solid finish, because it's a dresser top. It's going to be, stuff's going to be sat on it, moved, and all this stuff. So I put multiple coats of poly on all the bare wood. Once the first coat was dry, I come in with a 220 grit sandpaper and lightly, I am not pushing it at all, very lightly run this over the top to just try to remove any bubbles or dust. I mean, I'm still outside with this one, so I don't think it had rained yet. But after sanding, I wiped it off with a rag and then I could put on the next coat. I don't know what happened here on this edge, but the paint did not stick. I randomly saw this and I was like, well, oh well. So when I was going to do my 4th and final coat of poly on the top, I'm also putting 1 coat on all of the paint. I like the finish that this gives, especially because this was not furniture paint. It just gives a nice hard coat on top of all the paint. So I think this is important, especially when using a low quality paint. With the top coat dry after waiting a couple days, we're ready to put on hardware. And I made this simple by making a template the same size as every rectangle that needed a knob and marking the exact center for where the knobs needed to go. And then I could just go through and drill each spot and attach each knob. The handles, on the other hand, were a little more challenging. It was hard to figure out the math to get the spots exactly right. But once I got that figured out and went through and marked every drawer and drilled every hole, and then went to put the hardware on, I realized 2 of the handle holes were off just slightly, which is very easy to do when you're spacing these holes out just right. In order to fix that, thankfully I didn't have to go in and patch the holes and totally re-drill holes. I just took my drill bit and pushed it to the side that the hole needed to get a little bigger at, so that the screw could kind of lean and get to the right position to meet the drawer handle. And that worked on the 2 that I didn't get it on right. So the mineral spirits did not remove that oil spot. It was still greasy when I touched it. So I scoured the internet and found this idea to use vinegar and baking soda in hopes that it would help. In thinking about this, I don't understand how vinegar and baking soda can remove oil, but this is what came up. So I gave it a try, let that sit for a little bit, tried to make a paste out of it so it could kind of, I guess I could see the baking soda soaking things up. It usually soaks up smells in carpet and things, so maybe this was supposed to soak up the oils, which, spoiler alert, it did feel less greasy when it was done. But I let that sit and wiped up after it sat for a while the excess, and then I let it sit outside to dry and just finish drying out, because I need to put a liner in here because I know the stain's not going away. While that dried, I did line the other drawer that's going to be on the top. I'm not lining the rest of the drawers, just the top 2. I used the same paper liner that I used with the dresser's set that I'm trying to match. And then by then I could clean up the leftover baking soda and do a liner on this other drawer. Now, joke's on me. I'm trying to use up things I have, and this was all the contact paper I had left, and it was not enough to cover the drawer. So I could either pull up the other contact paper that I just put down, or I could use a different one and be okay with it not matching. Granted, if I was selling this, I would make them match. But I kind of wanted to see if my husband would ever notice that the top drawers don't match, the liners don't match. So I told my daughter about this. I was like, don't tell your dad. I'm going to see how long it takes if he ever notices that this doesn't match. And he's been using the dresser for about a week, and he still hasn't noticed. If he watches this video, he might be like, hey! But as of now, he has no idea. So I think it's kind of funny. We are officially done with this piece, but I want to show you the before to remind you where we've come from before I show you the final reveal. As a part of the final reveal, I will also show you the other dresser that I tried to make this match to. Let me know in the comments if you think, yep, looks like a set, close enough, or yeah, no, you missed it, totally didn't work. Just let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, stick around to the end. I've got some other videos of mine that I would recommend that I think you would enjoy. But I will let you go into this final reveal. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video.